So I'd like to call to order our co-curricular committee meeting today, noting that all committee members are here along with other members of our administrative team. And the first thing we need to do is approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There are no public comments, so we'll just move right into the co-curricular report. Nick is here to walk us through that.
Let me bring up the spring.
Yeah, the participation summary. So we're a year into these reports, and again, if you ever want to add something to them, if you're looking for more information on something or less information, by all means, we can tweak them. So this was just the summary from the spring, just like we had done for the fall and for the winter. For the high school, it's our most heavily participated in season. And again, the 40% just means for athletics. This would include any of like the clubs or extra activities that are available as well. So that number is obviously much closer to 75–80% when you start adding all of those in. Obviously, we have big programs in the spring like track, which really buoy those numbers. But boys lacrosse saw an increase in numbers. Girls soccer had 3 teams this year instead of 2, which they had the year before. Baseball has 4 levels, 2 at the freshman level. All of that, as you can imagine, poses challenges with busing, but also with officials and just locations. So we were able to get through it. The weather was absolutely miserable for spring sports. I mean, the amount of rescheduling that went on was huge, but then again, you look at something like the turf at Warrior Stadium and the turf at the pitch, it would have been even worse if we don't have that, I mean, by far. So there were teams that even ended up, we were supposed to go to their location, they ended up coming to us because we have turf, so now we save on the busing. It's really cost, it is cost neutral because they're going to cover the officials as well, so save a little bit there. Middle school, the only sport that's available during the spring season is track. That's not an uncommon thing. That's not something that only we're doing. So that's where you see that number really much lower than what you see in the other seasons at 14.7%. Bottom left, I did include the GPA, for athletes versus non-athletes. That's not really a surprise when you look at national numbers, and most schools would, I assume, come into where your athletes have a higher GPA than your non-student athletes. So you can see the difference there. And then as I did for the other 2 seasons, I just ran the top academic program from a GPA standpoint for that season, and that was softball at 3.80. And then you just have your participation. So again, we grew from last year, so we had about 482 students in spring athletics the year before in purple there, and then we grew to 541. And again, I talked about the girls soccer numbers being higher, even boys lacrosse numbers were higher, and then even girls lacrosse had a little bit of a bump in numbers compared to last year. And then I have the highlights like I normally do, so I try to put something for each team. We had a couple coaches of the year in their sports. Charlie Smith for girls soccer was the player of the year in the Badger Conference. Multiple conference champions. Special shout out to boys golf, who won their first ever state championship in the spring, which was a huge upset compared to where they were predicted to finish going in. They had a great team going into the state tournament. But they were really able to capitalize on a couple of the teams not performing as high as they were supposed to, but then really overperformed. And that includes a student athlete that was sick and gutted it through for those 2 days. I mean, that was, I think, if for anybody that saw the, I won't say parade, but the tour around the city and the or the village in the vans, and then it worked out that boys lacrosse playoffs was home that night, so able to stop there, go into the stadium with the trophy, be on the video board. So
That's
I mean,
awesome.
I think Betsy Sage still talks about it every time she comes in, so she's just still flying pretty high with that experience. And I think the next page just has a couple more shout outs for sports or highlights for the teams as well. A lot of different all-conference members, state qualifiers in tennis. Baseball and softball were very young this year too. So baseball ended up getting to the regional finals against Verona. Had a chance to win, but ultimately fell there. And then you can kind of see what happened there with the rest of the teams. Then I realized on years past, the code violation summary was contained in the final year-end report. So you can see that there were 4 alcohol or tobacco code violations, 3 for conduct. Conduct could be anywhere from online behavior or postings to just things that happened during the school day that resulted in discipline referrals. And then you have 2 that resulted from the drug test that the random drug testing that we do throughout the school year as well. This was down from the previous year. So do a quick math, that's 9 students. It was roughly double that last year. It might be a little higher. You can pull the report from last year too, but this was down from the previous year. If there's any questions on kind of that overview there.
Successful spring.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I talked about the challenges with the weather, but teams were able to still get through their schedules or reschedule anything that was postponed and completed for the most part. You just got to get in that bind at the end of the season where you're not able to reschedule everything just because of other team schedules, playoffs coming up, and things like that. But everybody was able to experience as much of the season as they could despite the weather.
Very good.
Wonderful.
Did you need this open?
Yep. And then I thought I'd add this on just to kind of, if I can bring this forward to each update as well. Just kind of talking about appreciation, what's coming up for us in athletics. You know, I know we're all kind of aware of the construction hazards that's been this year and the challenges that's been faced by everybody. And then obviously losing the middle school gym as a location was pretty big, but every coach has been able to run their camp how they need to. It might not be at the exact location they were used to just because of the challenges that I mentioned with either the construction at the high school or having to relocate from the middle school. But I do want to give appreciation for everybody willing to adjust on that. That includes not just coaches, but the custodians too at those buildings that aren't used to having some of these groups in there that they did have. Working around summer school as well. Middle school football practice will take place on the high school campus this fall, just because Heritage is not available anymore with the construction that's going on there. We just didn't want them maneuvering through that site back there, and to try to use the field, the water wouldn't have been on for them either. So would have been a challenge from changing to transportation to bathrooms. So they will utilize the bowl at the high school, the lower bowl off of Simon Crestway. And then I do have to give appreciation to boys soccer. They have that third field that they were able to work their schedule out with, middle school schedule, to use that as a secondary location for the 4 middle school football teams. So Coach Graverson, Coach Baldwin, and then the boosters for soccer, appreciation for those 3 groups working that out with each other and not stepping on each other's toes or taking away opportunities in from soccer just because we were in need of the space for 2 seasons.
The bowl, that was a freshman era, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yep, so we were able to move them on days that the middle school isn't here, because a lot of middle school games are on Mondays and Tuesdays, which helps out because those are practice every day for the high school program. So on days when they do conflict, we're able to use those 2 green spaces above Warrior Stadium for a spot, as well as some of the space where the discus area is as well. Just kind of upcoming things. So the first booster club meeting of the year is tomorrow. It's going to be virtually due to construction and just not having a location that they're going to want to be kind of dance around with what's going on at the high school. So we'll have some of the updates on WIA rule changes at those meetings, and then just kind of general reminders from the athletic department. That'll only be the 4th meeting that we've had since the booster club handbook instituted the policy of 2 meetings per year. So kind of like these meetings, just kind of looking for ways to make that the most useful for everybody that's in attendance, hopefully giving them information that they haven't heard before, just stuff to be aware of when it comes to fundraising. And we want to make sure obviously nobody's having their students' eligibility jeopardized, and there's all the things in the news about, name, image, and likeness and what that could mean for the WIA coming up. And so we kind of break down what happened last spring with the vote and where that's kind of headed to for the future. The only handbook that didn't come forward to the board in the spring was the coach's handbook. So we will review that. I just wanted to give that time to be able to review that with coaches throughout this year. And then that way we come forward with the other handbooks in spring, just like the middle school code, the high school code, and then the booster code, booster handbook. I think that was in May this year. So seems like it's been a couple years since that's been reviewed. So just like when I worked with Annie Blackburn to get the formatting done of the other code books, we'll do the same thing with the coach's handbook, kind of make it a little bit easier to access right now than the format that it sits in. And then obviously the long-range athletic facility planning that's going on with any sort of possible future referendum. All the coaches were able to kind of give their wish list, what their needs and their requirements for what that future referendum would look like. We submitted that to EUA as part of their architectural process. And so they have that information. So the next step is after we get more information from EUA, we'll start to have in-person meetings with those coaches and kind of exactly map out and start to do site visits to other schools and what we think we need in order to keep setting ourselves ahead of everybody in our competition to kind of provide those experiences for our students, because we are outgrowing our space in a lot of different spots. So, and again, maybe not because of huge enrollment jumps, but because there's more people coming out for the sports that we are offering, and it's just, the weight room in particular has been a topic. There's just not enough space up there right now for everybody to use. So, I mean, you have what's up there right now, like they're operating above capacity for sure. I don't know what the exact figure is. I think the weight room was added on 2012, 13. Brian Kirsten is still here.
That whatever year the high school is on the plaque on the first beam in the comments was the year that was added.
So it's, I mean,
At least 10 years.
Yeah. And then just Jared Cralin joined our office last week, his first week, so he has stepped in where Sue Pates ended up retiring from. Very happy to have him. He's already trying to make this process easier for coaches to see who's eligible and who's not from registrations from Infinite Campus when that registration process opened up the week of the 4th. So he's made it much more user-friendly for coaches to kind of access on the fly who needs what and when. So he's getting his feet wet. I think he'll do a fantastic job. He does volunteer coach as well with the girls basketball program. He worked as a project manager for the district last summer when the Warriors Stadium project was going on. So he's been here. He's had a daughter that's gone through here. His son is here at high school right now. I think he'll be just a great addition, kind of give us that viewpoint from both the parent, community member, and obviously somebody that's a coach and working inside the school district during the year.
As an administrative assistant.
Yes. Yeah. That's kind of all I have on spring and just kind of looking ahead to this year.
Thanks, Nick. Please pass along our appreciation of this coaching staff and the players and the athletes too for their flexibility as we kind of navigate all this exciting construction that we're doing. And I know like you said, there's been a lot of moving pieces. So please pass along our appreciation for their flexibility and thanks for all your work. Does anybody else have any questions about co-curricular? Gordon? Well, thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
So moving on to consideration of new clubs. The first one would be the Medical Discovery Club.
Just for your information, because the form that I received has student names and stuff on it, I made it for login view only.
Okay.
So this is the public view that I will show up on the screen.
Okay.
And so that's why it doesn't show up there, but I did bring my hard copy if anyone wanted to refresh their memory.
And it appears that a student has requested a Medical Discovery Club, which looks like it entails offering opportunities for shadowing.
Mm-hmm.
And conducting professional research, volunteering in healthcare environments. And they're not looking for funds. They're not needing an advisor at this point.
Well, the advisor
they
is the
do.
Kaylee.
Yeah, they have an advisor, but a paid advisor,
Oh,
rather.
gotcha.
I'm sorry. They have a list of students who'd be interested in participating. They'll need facilities for meetings. No safety concerns. And it looks like Mr. Borowski signed off on it.
And just as another FYI, this got brought, but it's not going to be brought to the full board until October. We're going to just hang on to all club requests. Until that time, what we've done in the past is done that so that we're not constantly bringing one club and then another club. I talked to Mr. Borowski, and Mr. Gaborski kind of helped answer the question as well, that if we, because often a group of kids might come up with a club in September, that October is usually the better time to bring that, and that's why we put October in our policy for bringing all new clubs for the year.
The only question that I had, and I don't know if there's anybody here that could answer it, is I know we have a similar club, but I don't know exactly what they do in HOSA. I don't know if any, and so I was just curious about duplication of efforts. So that was the only question that I had. I don't fully understand what HOSA does, but I think they provide similar opportunities for shadowing.
To Nick or Brian, can you speak to that? Otherwise, I will bring that question back to Borowski and before we take this to the full board.
I couldn't go into detail as to the differences. HOSA is a nationally affiliated career and technical education program. So HOSA is connected to health occupations, is kind of part of the title. Would have a program of events coordinated at the state and national level.
Okay.
I don't believe, at least from my reading of this, I don't know that this is going to connect at a national level or state level.
Yeah.
So I don't know what need this is filling that HOSA hasn't been.
Okay.
But we do have an active HOSA club as well at the high school.
I mean, when I don't, this is my simple look at it, doesn't seem like a club in its activities. So that's where I'm like confused by it. What in its description there, kind of screaming like, yeah, I'm a club, doesn't have to scream it, but what about that? Because it seems like an activity that's going on. What, can anyone shed some light as to why this would be a club?
I would imagine that they're getting together to share their experiences and shadowing and what their knowledge of their discussions with other healthcare professionals or to help coordinate opportunities for shadowing. I'm not sure. That's just kind of what I inferred from the description. I'm in full support of connecting students and making sure. There was just a couple questions I had.
Well, and since we aren't bringing it to the full board until October, we could definitely ask Mr. Borowski to.
Or maybe the advisor.
Right, one of the two, yeah. Or both.
Yeah.
Do we
Might
have a
be.
definition for, how do we define clubs? Like, is there a criteria we have to meet? Is there a definition of clubs?
I mean, it's so
Yeah.
varied, I see, but
It
I
is
don't, there's,
really-
when I read it, it just, and it may very well be just fine, just.
So
Yeah.
Katie actually has my copy of the policy that kind of talks about what to do if you want to request a club to be, but I don't know if it outlines that for sure. I'd have to reread it
So-
again.
On here, it just says sufficient demonstrated interest by the student body, and they have to show a description of what the proposed activities they're looking to do, budget implications. Just kind of this form that they filled out.
Which is the same one you gave me for Tiffany, for instance.
I think so, yeah.
So really, it sounds like it's based on student interest
Mhm.
and understanding that there's a collective group of students. No number, a number hasn't been imposed. It could be 2 kids, it could be.
Right, and they gave
They
they
have,
submitted a list of.
right, they have about
potentially
30
Yeah, I
kids.
saw that.
Yeah.
That's clearly clubbish.
Yeah, there's an interest.
Yeah.
So I'm not opposed to not moving it forward. Those are just the questions that I had, so. I don't know.
Same, I guess I'd probably like a little bit more description on it from what was written there.
And I have asked Mr. Borowski for a cover memo for this, and I don't believe I've received it yet. If I have it, I apologize, it's buried a little bit.
Okay,
But I will talk to Mr. Borowski and see if I can't get just a little more
okay.
detail.
Or Kaylin. Is
Or
Kaylin
Caleb,
actually-
yeah.
She's a teacher at the high school.
So do we need
Doesn't sound like we need
I
Not
mean,
if it's coming, if it's not going to the full board, I don't think.
well, it's going to, if you,
In October.
if you guys, in October, so do you want to make a motion saying, bring it to the full board with these, with our concerns answered? And then as, at the full board, you will consider it again?
That makes sense.
But who's going to reach out and get the information from?
I will do that
Okay.
prior to October.
All
So
right,
you're saying you'll get the information and we'll receive the information? Is that, to your point, like it's coming to go to the board and we're getting the information at that time?
To follow up on the email to
These three?
Joan Kagan with the answers. And then determine whether or not to move it to the full board.
Mhm.
Or you still could, but it still could be voted down.
Right, exactly.
Still
That's,
can
I
move
guess
it.
I was leaning that way,
You still
that,
could move it.
We
I
can move
would-
it to the board. and we
yes,
could have
move it to the
a
board.
Discussion with these questions.
Move it to the board. We need more answers. Move it to the board for consideration.
These are the
With,
questions that were posed
Yeah.
in the committee, and here are the answers.
So then we just need that motion.
yes, we need a-
I'd like to make the motion to move this to the full board based on additional information.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so moving on to the next organization request, that MSAN.
And that's Tiffany. Tiffany,
Sorry, I couldn't be there in person today. We are our directors of special ed group. I'm on the board, the state board, and we're having a retreat today and tomorrow. So I apologize I couldn't be there in person. But I was able to sneak away for a few minutes. First, I just want to give a little bit of background, I guess, before we dig into the actual proposal. But so MSAN is an organization that we've been connected with for many years prior to me being in Waunakee. So I would say at least since 2019, and Tim could probably speak to how much before that. So it's an organization we've been connected to for a long time. It's the Multicultural Student Achievement Network. And they offer a fall student conference and a spring staff conference. So we have sent a few kids to the fall conference and some teachers to the spring conference over these last few years. So it's not a new connection with this group. And I think what's a little bit different about this past year is that we were a little bit more intentional about recruiting a larger group of students to attend the student conference. And out of that student conference, their goal is to connect, obviously, but also create an action plan. And the part about the student conference, in talking with the students, I went to several of their follow-up meetings this year, and it was really powerful to hear the students that attended talk about, this is the first time I've ever been in a room of people that look like me, that I'm not the lone or the one or two people. And they just felt so empowered and so excited about the work with this organization. And just to hear those student voices talk about how powerful this experience was for them, and them really what came out of this is like, how can we keep this momentum going, and how can we continue to connect and have leadership around this achievement for students of color. And so that's kind of what this group grew out of. And many of our surrounding Dane County districts have organizations specific to MSAN. So really it kind of grew organically out of this fall conference. And I'd say we have about 10 to 15 students that have been meeting. So the conference was in November and they've been meeting up monthly since then. And they do have 2 adults that have been working with them at the high school as kind of quasi advisors over the 23-24 school year. And I think the thing that's a little bit different about this experience or this organization is that it really ties into some of the work we were doing around DEI, and also and really one of our goals around some of our DEI efforts is to really keep student voice at the forefront Like we heard from our students in January for our student panel, and so many staff spoke with me and with other administrators about how powerful that experience was for them. Hearing how our students feel, hearing how they're sometimes treated in our schools, and knowing what they want from us and how we can, as adults, do this really important work to elevate their voices and to make change so that everybody feels like they belong in our district. So there's a lot of connections to this group to our DEI work as well, and to our DEI 3-year plan that we're going to be rolling out in August with the DEI committee. So that's kind of just a little bit of background and history on this group. The other piece of this is, I guess when I compare this group, I think about the Best Buddies group that we implemented last year. And we talked about it as, or at least Randy, when he spoke to it, said, this is something that the district's really interested in pursuing. So it's not necessarily, we do have kids already interested, but it's just a little bit different in terms of a student coming and saying, hey, I want to start this group, versus the district saying, like, this is really important part of our work, and we want to fund this right away instead of waiting those couple of years. So I think that's how this group is a little bit different. And I think, and depending on kind of the discussion today, but the funding piece, it could be in the short term funded out of our federal disproportionality funds. So for at least 2 years. So if that, as we look at that, is certainly an option as well, if needed. So that's just a little bit of background, but I know you had a chance to kind of read the proposal already. So I guess I'll defer to the group in terms of questions or concerns or comments that you have.
Thanks, Sydney.
So when any other kind of club is, or co-curricular organizations introduced or brought about, funding isn't typically automatically given. Isn't there sort of a interim period, 3 years or something like that? So I didn't know if you're requesting funding immediately, it looks like it was, and then how that all worked, because that would kind of break what we normally do, I believe.
That's correct. That's per the process, and that the board did establish that you're describing it accurately. There's for example, that other club seeks an approval for its first year, shows activity, and continued future activity for 3 years, and then comes back for a formal approval of funding starting in the 4th year.
And I didn't know if that's what was being requested here or something different. So you're looking for something different than what we normally do.
Right.
And then,
but it's very similar to what we did with the Best Buddies organization that we funded right away last year, because the district was wanting to break down barriers between students, regular ed students, and some of our students with special needs. And how could we break down those barriers? We could create this organization that we funded initially because it's a priority for the district. So I guess I was thinking of this organization in a similar vein as that one.
And how many years again, Tiffany, did the students attended the MSAN conference?
Tim could speak to the exact number, but for sure 5. Could be more than that.
So erring on the side of the students already having had several years of participating in the conference, is what Tiffany and I talked about in terms of they've already been doing it for beyond 3 years. And if it speaks to the disproportionality dollars, which, when do we have to have our disproportionality dollars spent by, Tiffany? I didn't ask you that question.
We can carry over. So like last year we had about $140,000 in disproportionality, but we're carrying over some of that into this year. But again, this year we have to allocate about that same amount of money. So we'll have the 140 plus additional carryover from 23-24. So we try and spend as much as we can within that year, but we can carry over into a second year if needed.
And so we're talking, I spoke with Brian, and so we're essentially talking between 1,000 and 2,500?
Yeah, well, based on comparable student organizations, it'd be 1,300 between 1,300 and 2,700, depending on the experience level of the advisor.
Tiffany, you brought these students to a DEI meeting, correct?
Right.
Those are the students you're talking about. They came in, they presented after they attended the conference. They did attend a DEI meeting that I was at, and I would just share, I was really impressed with the kids and the spirit that they came back with, and their vision of how they would love to kind of impact the school. I mean, whether they, can carry through and continue that. I think it would, in my mind, help move some of the objectives that we have for student inclusiveness and
Sense of community.
sense of community. These kids had that vision. They came back from the conference and they shared that with the DEI committee, and I was very impressed with what they brought back. So I think that, I'm not sure about the funding and how equitable it is with the rest of the clubs as they get started. I think that's a different question, but I would really support this organization. I think it's a group of kids that have a great vision for our school.
And I'll just add that one of the MSAN students actually is now a permanent member of our DEI steering committee on the district. Again, because one of our goals was to really keep student voice and student input and feedback at the forefront. So we do have a member from and that's the member that, or several members that came and spoke at the DEI meeting too. So, and just as an example, one of the things that each school district that the student groups work through at the conference is like an action plan. So their action plan was specific this year to how do we have more representation of students of color in AP courses. We know that's an area, whether it's honors courses, pathways, AP courses, that's an area we don't have appropriate amount of representation in. And why is that? And how are we sharing that information? So it was a unique area, but also something that in terms of data could support, that is a need for change in our district. So it was just they came up with that organically, but the data supports a need for that work as well.
In your amount of 1,300 to 2,500, did you say? And it has an advisor, so it's not a paid position for the advisor.
One of the numbers I quoted, this would become a high school non-athletic co-curricular club, and that means it's on a scale where with minimal advisor experience, you're at 2.5%, which is $1,354. 3.5% is kind of a mid-range, and then after 9 years of advisor experience, and so that person is paid 5%, which is $2,700 and change. You can't say per se what someone would be paid until I see what experience they have in leading a like student organization. And then we put them in the experience schedule. So that's why it's a range. It's 3 steps within the range in lowest to highest.
I am more in favor of just maintaining consistency with our policy, because I think it can get I just think it's important to be consistent. So I know that we approved last year the best buddies, and my understanding at that time was that the advisors, because of the nature of the group, and needed to be more certified or something.
It was more like a course.
Yeah.
That kids signed up for then. And didn't it meet during a regular school day? done their best, but
Any of our organizations meet during contact time. That's when Best Buddies meets, and it's not a course, it's an organization, and they also meet during the school day. Which is when I would say, and let Brian could probably speak to that better than I could, but a lot of organizations meet during that contact time.
I would say almost all of them do. I don't know if I'm speaking on, almost all of them do, Tiffany. I would agree with your statement there at the high school level.
And so I'm harping on the cost because, as you know, we came through a retreat and we're really talking about dollars and stuff and cutting things in here. We're looking to add, which it looks like it makes sense to do that, but how many of those little things do we add where we, at the same time, we're gonna be looking at, we gotta get rid of, potentially get rid of things. And so the cost, there is some, you're kind of saying it could be this to this, and that's really just the advisor cost. It's really not indicating any other potential expenses that could go along with it that we're not being made aware of. I don't know what they would be. You're gonna go to different events and things like that. Textbooks, just like we hear, see of everything else where they, so from my standpoint, the hesitation is cost. I'm just,
And I can say that MSAN, like when the students go to the national conference, when staff go to the national conference, that's all funded out of federal funds. So it doesn't come out of district funds.
why? I guess I'm not understanding why Best Buddies was funded differently than our other clubs.
I thought, wasn't that sort of what you were alluding to, Tiffany? Like, we do have the ability to pay for this out of, and you mentioned something, and I thought Best Buddies was sort of that way as well.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last sentence that you said. Sorry, it just cut out a little bit.
No, where Joan was saying, I did Best Buddies, the funding of that, I thought potentially was coming out of something else where you, at the start of this, when you're talking about where these funds could come out of
Or disproportionality.
the
dollars.
disproportionality,
Mhm.
that wouldn't have been for Best
Which
Buddies.
is correct. Which are dollars that we have for carryover this year, right?
Right, and that we need to allocate for next year. So I mean, we're probably talking $200,000 that we need to spend, which again, sometimes it's, we have presenters that come in, but it's a lot of money to spend, and so it wouldn't break that particular budget bank to include this with it if need be. So, but I also don't want to say that it might, if we're not found disproportionate, then we're no longer required to set aside those funds. So for sure, for 24, 25, 25, 26, we'll have those funds. But after that, again, we can't guarantee. And again, it's not, I don't want to make it sound like it's brand new funds that we get. It's a percentage of our existing special education budget required to spend on disproportionality related activities.
The piece that intrigued me the most was the students' identification of tying it to academic achievement and understanding in this nationwide, typically the number and percentage of students who take AP courses, or number of students of color, I should say, who take AP or enroll in AP courses are disproportionate. But what we also know is when we're intentional about ensuring, for example, in my previous district, we had all of our 10th graders take AP geography. So the idea is to expose the students to the content and the rigor of AP courses. And we also want them to earn a 3 or a 4 on the AP test, but in many cases, that's the first time they've been exposed to AP. And then they do go on to take other AP courses because you built their confidence in knowing and understanding that they can, one, take AP course, enroll in the AP course, but two, do well in those courses. So that was the piece that intrigued me the most in terms of what Tiffany brought to me from the students as it relates to moving. And in AP courses, you also see your academic achievement go up in other areas, in other content areas. So I took it a couple steps further in terms of the thinking of the children, I thought it was a great idea coming from the kids in terms of our DEI work and removing barriers that are typical in school districts nationwide as it relates to, in this case, taking AP courses. And they're being their own advocates and their own change agents, if you will, or advocating for themselves in this space. So that was what really intrigued me, and the sense of belonging and what their experiences were with saying when they went.
And I think I was just going to add one comment too, like when we think about one of the data points that we're looking at in disproportionality is like a sense of belonging, and what a big gap there is between our white students and our students of color in terms of whether or not they feel like they belong in our school district. And I just feel like any avenues, I mean, the work is a variety, you know, I have to come at it from a variety of different ways. And if this is one way that we can help students feel like they belong, and I think there's a direct correlation between, I feel like I belong here, and also a connection to that academic piece too. Because when you feel like you belong and you're more confident and you're, you know, respected in your learning environment, then that's going to connect to academic achievement too.
Would it be wrong to say, as long as there are disproportionality funds, that's what this would come out of? If there isn't, we'd fund it, but you know what I'm saying? Like, since this is really for that, that's where it should be coming from, and not that we'll exclude it when there isn't there, but just put that priority on that.
Yeah, and if we could fund it for those first 2 or 3 years where it normally wouldn't be funded, then it would be part of the budget. I can agree with that.
So do we have a motion?
Yeah, a motion to move this forward with that condition,
Funding.
the funding condition.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Tiffany.
All right. Thanks so much. Hope everybody has a great day.
Tiffany,
you.
can I ask one question quick? So in the fall, when they do the co-curricular fair, this group will set up, because they're seeking more members. It isn't just kids that go to the conference. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. They're seeking more members, and their goal is to really be like the leadership group. So we have a Los Sonadores, we have Black Student Union, we have Justice League. The goal for them is to be representative of those organizations, but kind of be the change agent, kind of the term Monica used earlier, in terms of, you know, being that leadership group that really looks at, okay, looking at all of our different groups, like what are some of the changes we want to see in our school culture and school academic achievement in those areas. So that's really their goal, is how can we kind of be the leaders and the change agents around, along with all of our peers. So.
All right, thank you.
And then just future meetings, but I don't think we need to schedule that now, or do we need?
Well, probably, I would suggest waiting until after the fall, and then Nick and I'll work out what the timeline will be, and we'll talk about them.
Okay.
Approximately when do we normally do that? Is that January?
We did it December last year.
Okay.
Just because end of November, you're running Thanksgiving,
Mhm.
early December, late November even. Just when everybody's wrapped up at the first, second week
Okay.
of November.
So if other clubs come forward, you say that there's kind of they get collected by October, and then they come to the board. If they come forward, does it come through this committee?
I know you and I are
Maybe
kind
after October,
Well,
Well,
they,
it would be, yes, I believe it does, because it's the first step is to seek formal board recognition,
approval,
because
yeah.
that gets you into the 3-year window.
Right,
If a group were not to seek formal board recognition because they're not interested or pursuing funding, they would not necessarily come here. They might still meet, and then kind of operate with the school's awareness, because they put them in the student handbook then but they just don't get into the 3-year pipeline for
So,
funding.
and it would never go retroactive. So you know they're meeting for a whole year, and then they say, yeah, we got this group, and all of a sudden, could they have recognition for that year that they were meeting, or does that not happen, or?
We sought with this practice, this policy that we put together, process, to avoid that.
Okay,
It has not yet, to my knowledge, Rebecca, I don't think we've had a situation yet where someone said, hey, we've existed for 4 years. Can we retroactively get credit? I don't believe we've run into that yet since we've established this.
Okay.
We absolutely ran into situations like that until we formalized it.
Yeah,
I just wondered with the few times that this committee meets.
well, and I just pulled up my email where I was talking to Nick and Brian about this, and I actually had that in my head because I said, Brian G said, from my recollection, the October 31st deadline was recognized that many of these ideas come forward at the start of the school year and would allow for groups to organize or recruit new potential members after school resumes. And I said, that was my recollection too. We'll stick with this as is, as long as the high school admin is amendable to the meeting prior to the board approval, because they're going to want to meet in the fall, right?
Yeah, but then.
And
we
it
have to
may
do
be December or
retroactive.
later before before they get approved by the board.
But if they can start meeting and then they
Yeah.
might get approved in December, but they'd be recognized for this
The
year.
timeline speaks to when they've got to submit the proposal by.
Yeah,
It doesn't block the board into when you've got to approve it.
Right.
Okay.
But so like it would prevent somebody from saying in like February 15th, hey, we got a great idea. Let's,
yeah,
they're gonna have to then wait to get into the pipeline till the next school year.
Okay.
But if somebody puts, if a group puts an application in October 1st.
and we don't
and
get it approved
sits
till
because you guys
December.
don't all
Yeah,
get together until
December.
Okay.
That's fine.
And that's fine.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's not gonna
It's-
stop anything.
This school year, Racona's won.
Okay.
And then if they want to request for a paid advisor, that is due by, I think, February.
Yeah,
It says something in February.
Yeah, so
That
that-
request to have funding
Yep.
is due in February.
Yeah, so that they've got to establish, we have continuing membership, we've had a
Mhm.
calendar of activities, we have a purpose, all those things.
I think it's good to have those policies too. Just,
Clarity, right?
yeah.
Mhm. All right,
Okay, so then we're just needing a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.